Get ready to dive deep into Buffalo's vibrant music scene because we're stepping inside the fabulous Flamingo Lounge for the 9th season of local music magic. In the Flamingo Lounge with Rockabilly Greg is more than just a podcast. It's a collection of stories that delves deep into the vibrant musical history of Buffalo and Western New York, creating a living archive where each story adds a unique thread to the overall narrative. This season, we're taking a deep dive into the heart of the music community. Join us for personal conversations with musicians and industry pros, where we celebrate the collective creativity that makes our favorite artists, venues, and events so special. But before we get started, I'd like to give a big shout out to our sponsors, CatsLikeUs.com, Diamond Hawk Golf Course and Pub, and valued supporter Buffalo Ironworks for helping to keep the music alive. This week is a special episode as we're recording live at the Kenilworth Library in Tonawanda, New York. From a $20 acoustic guitar inspired by the Beatles' debut to the Buffalo Music Hall of Fame, Dick Bauerle's career is a masterclass in musical evolution. A veteran of the Western New York scene, he rose to prominence with the legendary band Hardtimes before co-founding Select Sound Studios in 1975. As an elite producer and session guitarist, he's collaborated with icons like Rick James and Paul Shaffer. Whether topping smooth jazz charts on Atlantic Records or landing tracks in Mel Brooks Spaceballs, Bauerle's musical muse has traversed pop, country, and jazz. This is the story of a true sonic architect. I first sat down with Dick during the second season of the podcast, and since then I've been waiting for the right moment to bring him back. It's my privilege to have him with us again. Welcome back to the Flamingo Lounge. Actually, on the road, the Flamingo Lounge, Dick Bauerle.
Thanks, Greg. This is great.
Dick, yeah, this is a lot of fun. So, first time being out here on the road. We're in front of a live audience here.
Yeah.
So we're going to have some Q&A at the end. But what I want to do is start the way I always start the podcast. I always ask people, did you have an aha moment when you said, music is what I want to do?
Can I give you two?
You can give me as many as you want.
I mean, there really were two.
There you go. Okay.
From the time that I was maybe 6 years old, music always resonated with me. We would be taking rides with my parents and have the old, AM radio on in the car.
Right.
And there were certain songs, I don't know why, to this day, that moved me emotionally, that they, even as a 6-year-old, they went through me and did some, they elicited an emotional response. I would be embarrassed to tell you what those songs were, but I think I will.
There you go.
Okay. I mean, a couple songs I remember from that era were songs by Bobby Darin.
Mm-hmm.
There was a song by, believe it or not, Pat Boone,
Oh, there
Love
you go.
Letters in the Sand.
Oh, yeah.
And probably the one that really got me is I see that people are going to really look cross-eyed at me on this one, but Tammy by Debbie Reynolds.
Oh, yeah.
These songs, for some reason, did something to me. So that was kind of the part one. And then along that same time, once we moved from one location to another, the kid across the street had a guitar. And I was always obsessed with the guitar, even though I had no idea what to play it or what they were or how they worked. And that might have been quite possibly influenced by, the Elvis thing maybe.
Right.
Or maybe even Gene Autry and all those cowboy singers. Somewhere in there, there was an initial interest of wanting to play the guitar really badly. But then it kind of went away until 1964. When I, like everybody else, when
February
I saw
9th,
the Beatles
right? Yeah.
on the Ed Sullivan Show, and then all of a sudden that spark had kerosene put on it. And then I think that you talked about the seminal moment, as much as the Beatles were like, wow, I've got to do this. When I heard House of the Rising Sun by the Animals and that classic arpeggiated opening figure, it was like, I think I can do that.
Right.
I got to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
So those were the moments that were my big tipping points in saying, it's time. I have to pursue this.
Now, I know back in the 60s when that happened, here in Kenmore especially, Kenmore East, Kenmore West, full of great musicians many of them are Hall of Famers now. Billy Sheehan and Dave Schmeidler was around, and the Reinhardts, and so many of those guys. Were you involved in any garage bands back in those days? And I'd love to hear some of those great stories from back then when you guys were just, getting your feet wet. And
Well, yeah, those days I look, those were definitely the fundamental years of not knowing what we were doing and being terrified being on stage in front of people trying to do it. Our repertoire, because of our skill set, was so limited back then. We were restricted very high, very much as far as what songs that were on the radio that we could actually play, which basically filtered out about 95% of the songs that were on the radio. So we were restricted to like 3-chord songs like Gloria and songs like that,
right.
where, hey, okay, it's an E, D, and an A. I think I can handle it. That kind of stuff.
Right.
So there were a lot of great, like a lot of the Bird stuff was awfully complicated. At least when I started in 1960, my first job was, I started playing roughly in 65, but my first live performance was at a Ben Franklin dance in 1966. So yeah, I was with some neighborhood kids, and we were all trying to learn how to make music together at the same time, and it was definitely a mountain to climb. It took us about a year to figure out what vocal harmony was, and even then it wasn't very good. I don't think the Everly Brothers had anything to worry about with what we were doing, but at least it kind of gave us the basic idea of what was going on. And then if once you start to play and people start to tell you that, hey, you guys are fun, or you guys are actually pretty good, well, then you get even more inspired to kick your ability up another level, and then another level, and then another level. I can go back to even 1969, and I listened to songs that I played in a band called the Raves then, and I hear them on Sirius XM today, and I'm like, geez, we played that wrong. And there was a lot of that,
right.
A lot of, it was all trial and error. It really was. It was total trial and error. Yeah. There were people like Carol Jean who were, a bit ahead of our curve.
Right.
So we had to work, like really, really hard to elevate our performance level.
Right.
And we did. I remember, sitting home on my bed after doing my homework, practicing all kinds of major scale patterns and stuff to get my hands going. And I remember, people ask, and we talked about this, I think, well, what guitar players did you listen to? I can honestly tell you guys, I listened to everybody. Any kind of guitar playing excited me, whether it was people like Glenn Campbell playing country type stuff, or the Leon Rhodes, the guitar player that was on Hee Haw. These were great players. And my mother was a classical music, fan. So she turned me on to Segovia. I had Segovia records. My uncle was into flamenco, and he turned me on to Carlos Montoya. I had those records.
Right.
So it was anything guitar related that I just loved it. And I think that holds true to this day. People say, well, what kind of style do you play? And I always say, well, I'm kind of the proverbial, jack of all trades, master of none. I must have ADD, because I couldn't focus on one style and be a devotee that's all I wanted to do. I liked too many different kinds of music, and I wanted to learn how to play a little bit of all of it, which actually did me well because it led to my career as a session guitar player, where I got to play all that stuff.
Right.
So I got to fake Spanish stuff really good.
There you go. You learn to make it your own, right? It's not that you're making, doing it wrong. You're making it your own.
Well, no, you sort of did, and the ironic part of that Spanish part of me, however small it is, I produced 5 religious albums for a religious trio of sisters from Puerto Rico, and when we first had our initial meeting, I assumed that these songs were going to all have that Latin type of an influence. And they said to me, no, we want, they had heard my stuff, and they said, no, we want it to sound like 80s American rock. And these girls, by the way, were very good, and the songs were good. They sang like birds, and they actually won several Latin Christian music awards. And I'm really proud. In fact, one of the guys, actually, I don't have copies of too much of that stuff, but I got a copy of a couple of them, and I had to reach out to the contact,
right?
And I said, "Who played on these?" And he goes, "Well, you did." So I said, "Prove it." So then he sent me the CD jackets to prove it, but I didn't really remember doing, so much work, arranging it, producing it, helping him with the vocals. it was an opus. It really was.
Right.
But what a learning curve.
Yeah. Now, did you have a specific guitar that like style and or brand that you liked? Did you go out and get a Gretsch or a Rick after you saw the Beatles? Or
I wish I could have afforded one.
Yeah.
No, my first guitar was a Japanese 4-pickup Kimberly guitar that I lifted I shouldn't say this, but because I'm really an honorable person. I went to the Sattler's Music Store, and there was a stick-on Epiphone E on the counter, and actually the guy gave it to me. So when I went home, I put the fake Epiphone emblem on my Kimberly and told people that I actually had an Epiphone guitar.
Oh, here you go.
And I didn't. But the thing is, I became kind of a gear junkie at an early age. So I would always go up to Sattler's and drool over all the Vox equipment, the occasional Rickenbacker and the Gretches and stuff. We did a big show, and Carol, you might remember this. The Cave on the Boulevard, not too far from where we are right here. That was the place. I mean, when you're an up and coming musician, all the really good guys played at the Cave, bands like the Rogues and, a host of others. So when we had a chance to play a battle of the bands at the Cave, that was a real big deal for my band, even though we were far from ready and no, we did not win, probably far from it. But I remember for that show, a friend of mine from Ben Franklin lent me his green Gretsch anniversary single pickup guitar so that at least I had a professional guitar to play on stage. If I use the word play loosely, by the way, at this point in my career, I was in 9th grade. But yeah, that was it. I mean, the first really good guitar I got, professional guitar, was in 1967. I had a Rickenbacker 330.
Wow, nice.
Which I got from Kuberis, which my parents finally realized I was serious about music, and they helped me sign for it. And of course, I ultimately paid for it out of what little money I made playing back in those days. And then in 1970, I got my first Holy Grail guitar. Gibson started reproducing the Les Pauls more often. So I traded in the Rickenbacker for a Les Paul.
Yeah. You kind of mentioned Kubera's. A little bit of a segue. How instrumental was Art Kubera with everybody here in town?
Oh, he was huge, because without Art Kubera, none of us would have had anything. No, we never would have had any access to professional gear. And for those of you who don't know, Art, he was like the patron saint of all Buffalo musicians. How easy was it working with Art? Here's how the process went. There were people that went to Art, older people like, Nick DiStefano, and probably people like Dan Cook that and that went there, and they would get stuff from Art on account. So what Art did was he had a card file. So you bought something, and whatever you bought, let's say you bought a guitar that was $300, right? He would write that on your card file, and all he wanted was, there was no mandatory payments. All he said was, don't vanish. I don't care if you give me $5 a year. Just don't vanish and make payments. So once people like that had established themselves, the next step was they would put it then in a word for you, which is what happened to me. Somebody vouched for me and said, he's okay. So I then got to be part of Art's card file. So I was able to go in there anytime I wanted. And a lot of times Art encouraged me to take stuff that I knew I really couldn't afford, didn't want it. But my best equipment I got from Art. My second Les Paul, my Marshall stack, all the good stuff I got from Art. And eventually I did pay him totally off.
That's awesome.
But no, he was, and he did that with everybody, not just me. Joe Hesse, by the way, I think from the road.
Oh, yeah.
Joe is my sponsor. It's kind of like Musicians Anonymous. Joe is my sponsor.
Yeah, and Joe is a Kenmore boy. I know he grew up around here. There's so many great musicians.
Well,
Well,
and let me tell you, you had mentioned the Kenmore boys, and you're talking about it now. When I was at Kenmore East, people like, I was there. Not to blow my own horn. That's not what I'm doing. I was there at the same time as Dave Constantino, Bill Sheehan, Bruce Percato, Ted Reinhardt. We were all at Kenmore East and friends at the exact same time. And when you think about it, that's a pretty remarkable grouping of people to all be there at once.
Yeah.
And again, we were all friends. And I should mention one other name who I think should get in the Kenmore East Hall of Fame, if not the Buffalo Music Hall of Fame, Stuart Ziff. Now, you may not have heard of Stuart, but Stuart was in a lot of local bands that were quite good. Eventually went to Nashville, and until recently, he spent about the last 12 years touring with the band War, if you know the band War.
Right.
And he was another one of us Kenmore East guys. And Stuart and I did get together one time recently when he came into town. And if you don't think those conversations were fun, they were really, really fun.
Yeah. I believe Stuart is inducted in the Hall of Fame, in the Buffalo Music Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he should be. And he should be definitely in the Kenmore East too. And I'm kind of working on that. So, I mean, he deserves it. I mean, national cred and, and all that. So, and plus he wrote that he co-wrote that I Got a Thinking Problem. That was a big country hit many years ago.
Yeah, I remember that one.
So, I mean, what more can you ask for to get into a Hall of Fame, really,
Yeah. Well,
I only have 16 and a half seconds of Spaceballs. He had at least a 3-minute song,
Yeah, which we have that up here, so we'll get that. I'm trying to stay in chronological order.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If we get, no, that's all right.
I'm sorry.
I tend to go, ADD and bounce off all the wall myself.
That's what I get for being a former talk show host. Trying to take the show over. Go ahead, Greg. I'll shut up.
Right. Hey, it's not about me; it's about your story. So, as I mentioned, but before we got on, we're trying to just capture the stories here, and especially with us being here at the Kenilworth Library, to kind of have some of the focus on the local, Kenmore and all that.
Great.
I know my kids went to West, and of course there were some great musicians, the Freelands and some other folks that were
the
Kenmore,
weekend kids.
The weekend kids,
went to, the Ryans were Kenmore West people.
Right.
And by the way, back in those early days, I know we kind of got slightly off track, but in 1966, 67, when you're a young band, there were a lot of CYO dances and church dances, some school dances, and that's where we were relegated to play. Except I did play my first bar job at the old barn in East Aurora. I was 15 years old, and I can't believe my parents let me do that.
We were allowed to drink back when we were 18, so you could kind of get away with it.
Well, that was back when all it took was an eraser and those old style license. It was real easy to make it to some other number. So, although I was never asked for proof, but I mean, I can't believe I played a bar gig when I was 15.
Yeah,
and we played with Big Wheelie, by the way, at the Milshire Lanes. They used to have bands at the bowling alley on Military, and they had 2 stages, and we did a lot of coke shows. With Chuck back in those days. It might have been Caesar and the Romans, actually, prior to Big Wheelie is who they were. But, Dan Cook was in the band and a lot of other guys. I don't know if Ears was in the band or not. But that was really fun. That's when I got to meet Fred Caserta. And that proved to be a good in to have years later.
Yeah. So let people, who was Fred Caserta, for people who don't know?
Fred Caserta was a booking agent, and he made his reputation initially with Chuck. He and Chuck were really, really close. So he promoted Caesar and the Romans.
Right.
Again, ultimately, who morphed into Big Wheelie and the Hubcaps. And then Fred Caserta also was tied into Fred Saya from Great Lakes Booking, who was our booking agent. And once Fred Saya sort of had to not be publicly involved, shall we say, in booking, Fred Caserta was able to kind of be the front person for Great Lakes Booking. And I had a good relationship with Fred. Right. And Fred was also very close. He's departed now, but Fred was very close to Mike Caputi, who is also one of my drummers in the jazz band. So there was again, we all know each other, and that, we're only, what do they say, 2 degrees away from each other.
In Buffalo, it's 1, I think.
Yeah, probprobably. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
The more I do these podcasts, it's like there's 1 degree of separation.
But Fred was a big shot. I mean, he was a VIP in the music industry.
And of course, Fred was the one who started Kingdom Bound.
Yes, that's right.
Out of Darien Lake. So
with Mike. Mike was involved in that too. Mike Caputi.
Yeah, good stuff. So, and of course, they had the road, on booking, and I was able to find some old artwork from one of their posters, and it had Great Lakes Booking on it.
Great Lakes was dominant. The way that it broke down was Great Lakes Booking had all the rock clubs, which were desirable. I mean, for us, we were playing rock, so I mean, that's where we wanted to play, right? And the other booking agency, JR Productions, which was the Sansone group,
Right.
they more or less did all the lounges. So they did all the kind of the show type bands.
Right.
So that's how there was, I think, a reasonably close tolerance between the two factions, because they really weren't competing. Fred was not going to put us, at the Three Coins or the Executive or Weekend or the Road. He wasn't going to put us there. So we did a lot of out-of-town dates. We did a lot of gigs in Rochester. We were very popular in Rochester. And back in those days, it was great. Those were hard to relate to now, but those were all 6 or 7 or on the lead, or in some cases 5 night in a row gigs, where you moved in once and then you were there for like 5-6 days. And then you moved out. And with that, kind of gave us the luxury of being able to do is we actually hired a road crew, because we didn't have to pay them that much. They had to move in once and move out once. So I always tell people, when I was younger, in great shape, and had more hair, I didn't have to move a thing. And now I'm older, and all that other stuff is just the opposite. And now I got to move my stuff. Not fair. Life is not fair.
There you go. Yeah. Well, we'll call the ambulance for you, but Dick. So
Please don't.
That's right. No, so now, what was the first band that you were playing in, like that was making some dough?
That would be the Hardtimes.
Yeah.
And we started out as a 7-piece, and I'll give you I don't want to bore anybody. I'll give you guys the Reader Digest story. We were a high school band, all of us from Kenmore East, and we initially started out 7-piece. And I should say one of our members, Sal Azzarelli, now unfortunately deceased. Sal ended up being he's a B3 guru, and he ended up working with people like Celine Dion, Steve Winwood, Felix Cavalieri from the Rascals. Wow. And he went on the road with a lot of the famous jazz organ players, and that was his thing. He loved that 3-piece, jazz organ type of thing. So Sal was in the band, but we started out 7-piece, and then by things happened, and certain members got better than other members, and some didn't. So then the 7-piece band ultimately became a 6-piece band. But the big moment for Hardtimes occurred in I would say February of 1972. Good thing I have a good memory.
There you go.
And that was when the road finally broke up for the last time, and Fred Saya insisted that we put Nick DiStefano, the drummer, in our band.
Right. Okay.
And that elevated the band in every way, shape, and form. So that really got us starting to sound good and starting to play more. But after about 4 months, Nick then he hooked up with Mike Spriggs, who was in the Rogues, and Mike lives out of Nashville now, and he does a lot of session work. You can see him in videos. In fact, he does a lot of live acoustic work for like Trisha Yearwood and people like that. Talk about fame.
Absolutely.
And anyway, when he left, the Tweeds had just had a falling out, and that's when Paul Varga joined our band.
Okay.
Now we were a 5-piece band, and that was the love of my life. That was the band that was just so good. And I've got live tapes to prove it, by the way.
There you go.
And I will tell you, in 1972, after Paul joined the band, we played 313 times. The next year, in 1973, we played 331 gigs. Wow. And I had them all listed, and I know how much or how little money we made for every one of them, but don't tell the IRS. Although I think the statute of limitations is now passed.
Yeah. and we'll add in inflation for that. So.
Yeah, really. But it was good. I mean, I paid for my entire college education because of Hardtimes.
Yeah.
And also I used to put my cash in one of those safes that we all had, those little metal safes. So I'd pay my tuition, buy my books, and it'd be like, oh, gee, I got $500 left over. Time to go to Kubera's. see what I can buy.
That's right. They call that now EGS, Dick, excessive gear syndrome. So
I still have it.
Yeah. Well, you never get rid of it.
But I think I'm
more toys for.
I think I'm in pretty good shape now. Yeah. I mean, I honestly can't think of anything else that I would at my age. This is my 60th year, by the way, doing this. Wow. It's my 60-year anniversary of performing in Buffalo. And I know I look every bit the part of it. So 60 years of doing this.
Wow, that's
so,
fantastic.
After 60 years, how much more gear can you accumulate? You can really only play one guitar at a time. But don't tell that to the 24 that are in my closet at home,
right.
or to the 10 amps I have in my room. Don't tell them.
That's right. You
don't tell my wife.
Enough. That's right. No, we won't.
She's aware, and she's been 50 years of marriage. She's been very supportive my entire career. She's seen the, worked with me through the down period, and and enjoyed the up period. And I've had, like I said, I have no regrets. I have more up periods than down periods as my career progressed over the years. I mean, I wanted to stay here. I wanted to raise a family. I wanted to live a normal life. I wanted to make music. I didn't want to jump in a van and starve in California. That was never anything that I wanted to go. I wanted to do. And I had chances. I had people that asked me, hey, why don't you come on the road? No, I don't want to do that. I want to spend time with my wife. I want to spend time with my daughter. Any success I have in music, I want to do it my way. I don't want to do it this other way. And I'm glad I didn't. I mean, if you look at a lot of these older rock stars, people that were actually famous, most of them really don't look very good right now. Many of them have passed away, and they're all still playing because they need the money. Enough said.
Right. Now, taking a little bit of a segue. So how did you get involved in Select Sound Studios? Because that was mid 70s, right? So taking a little Hardtimes, 72. So
right, same time period.
Jump a couple of years.
Same time period. A high school friend of mine had gone to another friend's house who happened to be, I knew his brother from Kenmore East. Kenmore East connection keeps coming up again and again and again, So anyways, he had made a 4-track recording on a 4-track recorder, sound on sound. And not that it was that great, but it sounded great to me at the time. And I said, I want to do that too. So I got to meet Bill Colton that way because his brother Chuck I went to school with. Okay. So Bill and I became fast friends. And so one Saturday when we weren't playing, brought my stuff over to Bill's house. We put mattresses up on the wall in an upstairs bedroom, and away we went. We recorded like 3 songs, and we looked at each other and said, there's magic. We got to do this. So, in time, he ended up building a studio in his basement, and I was involved in that.
Right.
And then, Bill got the equipment, and we started doing some recordings. And then ultimately, I had gotten married and I had a crappy day job. He didn't like his day job, so we decided, let's quit our jobs and let's try to do this recording studio thing full time, out of the basement.
Right.
And that's how it started.
Right.
And that goes way back, and we've got some of the tapes from those old days too,
cool.
by the way. And we want to do, believe it or not that anybody would watch it except for us, but we really want to do a documentary of the history. We've had a lot of famous people that have walked through the doors at Select Sound, and on occasion still do.
Right.
But nobody knows about it because there's been so many of them.
That's right. Well, you got to kind of keep it, kind of a little bit of a secret thing. You don't want people hovering around if there's some major, people in there performing.
Some of it's secret. The Gloria Loring thing that we did, that wasn't secret, nor was it intended to be. But I worked with people. I recorded people like Melanie, and she was a hoot, by the way. And she passed away, I think, last year.
Right.
But Melanie, Brand New Key, and Candles in the Rain, and she was a sweetheart. She was really, really nice, and she was so fun to work with. The only problem was she had hooked up with Lenny Silver from Amherst Records, and she wanted to get back into the pop mainstream, which at the time had a lot of dance mixes. I don't know if you guys remember those, where they would take a pop song and then they'd take a 3-minute song and they'd take stuff out and they'd make it about 15 minutes long. Well, that's what she wanted to do. So they came in with the tape. It was a quarter inch mix down tape. And her husband, who was like her producer, he would say, okay, I want that segment there and that segment there. So I kept making copies of these different segments, and I had them all taped up along the walls of the Select Sound control room. Right. And then I had to remember what segments were what, so that with a razor blade editing, no digital editing in these days, I had to piece all this thing together. That session was about a 12-hour session. The only thing that was even more physically demanding was the Gloria Loring session. That was about 35 hours of just really being beat up, not by her, but just by the timetable that we were trying to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why eventually, the studio ran out of time,
Right.
because they had other obligations. They were teaching recording classes. So that's when there was a big rush to get that album out, because she had that song, Friends and Lovers, which is a big hit. And it was a duet with Carl Anderson, and they both had equal rights to put that song on their album. So the race was on. Whoever could put the album out first was going to be the winner. So Jerry Myers was determined we were going to win.
Mm-hmm.
So he decided, hey, we better finish this thing in New York City. So we went to New York City, and much to my surprise, we were in the control room at Select Sound, and she says to me, you got a second? There's somebody on the phone that wants to talk to you. I'm like, okay. So I go in there, and the guy, I don't remember his name. I could probably look it up. He was the music director of the Glenn Campbell Good Time Hour, and he was a friend of Gloria. And apparently every night when we recorded, she overnighted the rough tracks to this guy to look over. And he said to me, he goes, look it, I like the tracks. I understand that all of the stuff that's good, according to Gloria, came from you and your input. She wants you to stay on as producer when we bring this thing to New York City. Are you willing to do that? And I'm like, what am I, an idiot? Of course. So off we went to New York City.
Right.
And we recorded at Jerry Ragavoy's studio. That name might not mean anything to you, but he was a real big shot in the New York City recording scene. His claims to fame amongst some of the production he did, he wrote a little song called Time Is On My Side by the Rolling Stones. You may have heard it. But he also wrote Piece of My Heart by Janis Joplin, and I know you probably heard that one.
Mm-hmm.
And those were his writing creds.
Right.
And so I'll never forget this. So we fly to New York City at 9:00 on a Sunday morning, and we have a pre-production meeting at like 10:30. So we're sitting in his studio, and then he asked me, he said, all right, well, we got a session tomorrow at 9. Who do you want? Who do I want? I mean, I felt like a kid in a candy store. He's asking me who I wanted to play on this record. So I figured, you know what? You may as well just go for the gusto. And so I knew the main New York City players, at least by name. So I said to him, look, very nonchalantly, by the way, like I actually knew what I was doing. And I said, I'd like Steve Gadd on drums. I said, I'd like Paul Shaffer on keyboard.
Right.
I said, Will Lee, if you can get him. And I said, since I'm not allowed to play guitar because that's a New York City type thing where if you're producing, you don't play. And so I said, you go ahead and get the guitar player. So we go into the studio the next morning at 9:00, and I look in the studio, who's setting up the drums but Steve Gadd, who obviously is like considered the world's, best drummer, or at least one of the top two.
Right. Yeah.
And then who walks in 5 minutes later but Paul Shaffer? The bass player, I didn't know. His name was Neil Jason, but he also has played with everybody. If you look up his discography, and I think now he plays with Roxy Music, but he also played on the Cyndi Lauper album, the big one with Girls Just Want to Have Fun on it and all that. He played on that album. And he was a little aloof, but the other guys were great. I mean, I got along great with Steve Gadd and with Paul Shaffer. We hit it off, right away. And the funny part, so they go out there and they cut one track, right? They come in the control room, and Steve Gadd asked me if his drum part was okay. I mean, like, what? Of course it was. What am I supposed to say? No, Steve, I think you better do that again.
Right.
I mean, these guys were pros. I mean, they were incredible, but they were really nice people. And, I'll never forget how nice they treated me. They didn't treat me as some bumpkin from Buffalo, New York that was an unknown. They treated me very nice.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Steve Gadd is a Rochester boy. So
yeah, we talked about that.
He's in the Rochester Music Hall of Fame.
We talked about that, and we talked about the Orange Monkey. He knew all my old haunts.
Yeah.
And Paul Shaffer was from, where's he from? That town up in Ontario that's not too far from here.
Oh, yeah.
I can't think of the name of it right now, but we talked about Western New York weather, Southern Ontario. I mean, it was, just like I'm talking to you guys. I mean, it was very unpretentious. It was very, very down to earth. In fact, Paul Shaffer tells me, after our lunch break, he says, listen, I got to leave at 4:00 because I got to go tape the Letterman show. He goes, but don't worry, I got you covered. He goes, Paul Griffin's going to come over and he'll take over the keyboard stuff after I have to leave. Now, I didn't know who Paul Griffin was, but I found out later that he played with, Steely Dan. He played with a lot of the big gospel artists in New York City. But what he's most known for, that you guys would know, guess who played all those piano parts on American Pie by Don McLean? Paul Griffin. And he was a good guy. They were all nice. I mean, that was the time of my life. That whole sequence of events in my career was the best. I had just gotten my MCA contract. I'm working with Gloria Loring. And then I get a call from Jerry Meyer's secretary telling me that Mel Brooks wants to put my song in Spaceballs. And all this happens in about a 3-month period. Yeah. So that was, that was the height of my career, I guess. Not to minimize what I'm still doing. Right. But I mean, as far as national stuff, and then a lot of the MCA stuff and the Atlantic stuff got used all the time on Entertainment Tonight. They would use it as bump music, coming to commercials and coming back in. And that was a treat. Right.
Now, is that the Dick Bauerle group stuff that I have out here in front?
Yeah. That was a lot of it was off the first album, but they did use a lot of the stuff off the second. But they must have used at least 8 tracks off that original album. Right. And I didn't even know because back in those days, this would have been 87-ish. Entertainment Tonight aired locally on Channel 2 at like 7 o'clock at night. But back then, you could still get WOR out in New York City on cable. And the same show aired at 10 o'clock. So I could teach, then go home and I could see it. And I actually have a few VHS tapes where I did tape it. But the funny thing is, I was teaching a class. The first time it happened, I was teaching a class at Select Sound. And Peggy, Bill's wife, the secretary, she comes in and she says, Ted Reinhardt's on the phone. He's got to talk to you. Peggy, I'm teaching a class. Tell him I'll call him. No, he's insistent. So, all right. So I pick up the phone and Ted says, you're not going to believe this. I just heard our songs on Entertainment Tonight. So that was the first time that it happened.
Right. Oh, that's cool.
I thought he was crazy, but then I got home and I heard it for myself.
Right.
So that was like, again, a very fun period, for me because I came out of nowhere. Really, I came out of nowhere. And if I could come out of nowhere, a lot of people can come out of nowhere, but I worked real hard. It wasn't like I was not a child prodigy. By any means. Everything I ever learned how to play and do vocally or guitar wise or a little bit on the keyboard, that's from the School of Hard Knocks, not the TV show about football. And from the School of Hard Knocks. I mean, I had to bite and scratch my way to elevate, what I was able to learn how to do. And that wasn't easy. I didn't have YouTube to expedite my learning curve. I was slowing records down to 33 1/3 and then having to transpose them like a third up. It was not an easy way to learn how to play guitar. Now you can go to YouTube and you can learn how to play anything instantaneously.
Now, before we get into our Q&A session here, so let's jump to what you're doing now with the All-Star Project.
Okay. Right now I'm involved in a few different musical projects. My band is called ASP, which is short for the All-Star Project. That was a band we put together in 2011 to play one gig because a guy that we work with, Donnie Tomasulo, who is now our drummer, but then was our singer, we were going to open for another act from out of town that we knew. And Donnie wanted to do Tom Petty songs. So we had a rehearsal and we learned enough Tom Petty songs to cover an opening set. In the course of that, we all knew Roll With It by Stevie Winwood. So we did that, and that came out really good. And then during one of the breaks, somebody started playing New York Minute by Don Henley, and we started screwing around with that, and that sounded good. So we thought, why make this a one-show thing? And here we are, 16 years later, we're still together.
Right.
A few changes along the way. When you're playing with older people, and I hope I don't ever have to include myself in this, health issues crop up and people do have to stop. Paul Varga had to stop because of health issues. Jim Rummings had to stop because of health issues. It just happens. And God bless him, and God, thank you, God, I'm still here doing this. So that's one. And then I've done some work with Scott Salaney, and we formed an Eagles tribute band. And that band does pretty well. Right. And then he also got the yacht rock bug. So then he starts a yacht rock band with pretty much the same players that are in the Eagles band.
Right.
And then in addition to that, he's got his own band where I fill in with once in a while if his guitar player can't make it. So, there's a lot going on. And then on occasion, I do the Sam Garino, Nick Veltri show, which I was supposed to do Sunday, but, due to not feeling well, I was not able to partake on Sunday, which, broke my heart because I love those guys.
Right.
And I love all the singers. I love the fellow musicians.
Yep.
And it broke my heart not being able to do that, especially since I put about 35 hours into learning all the songs.
Wow. Yeah.
But hey, look, that's life. Nobody says life is fair, right?
Right. And that's always the Diva show at around Valentine's Day. So
it was the Diva show.
Yeah.
But I did the other one too prior to that.
Yeah. They do.
And they're great people. And they're all my friends. We're all around the same age, or at least within 5 years of each other. So we're all the old guard. It's the old guard. It's the old veteran of the Buffalo music scene.
Yeah.
That's us. And we love each other and we like playing together. And most importantly, we have a lot of fun and there's a lot of mutual respect.
Yep. I always get a real kick out of watching you guys get up there, and especially like when Twang Gang's playing at Sportsman's and someone will come up, hey, I'm going to do this song and it's in this key, and you'll see everybody watching everybody else. What are they doing? Bass players watching the guitar player, seeing what they're playing. And you guys make it sound like you've been playing together for, 40 years. And it's amazing to me how you guys can just pick it up and roll with it. And even like when Tom Stahl gets up and he's got an original song and you guys are just right there with him. It's crazy.
It's all about the ears. And again, when you're going to do something like that, you're not going to expect them to play a song like Yes. You're not going to be doing a progressive, complicated thing. So that does make it a little easier. Yeah. That if the song is well written, you can almost predict where it's going to go. It's going to be a 1 chord, a 4 chord, and a 5 chord in some order, with maybe an occasional 2 and a 5 thrown in somewhere.
Sure.
And your instincts just take you where you feel and hear where the song is going to go. So I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's not maybe as difficult as it appears. And again, with the Twang Gang, now I worked with Dwayne a couple of times. I produced some of his records and worked with them on that. And, we've known each other since, I've known him since 1977. And Doug Yeomans, I've done guitar seminars with.
Right.
John Bryans, I've played with.
Right.
And the only one I had to meet was Jim.
Yeah, Jim Sweet.
Jim Sweet was the only one who I had no previous experience with, and I turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful person. So now he's another friend.
Right. Yeah.
Another friend.
Yeah. Which I think the music community around here is, whether it's the old guard or the young guard. There's a lot of great young musicians coming up, and I know a lot of them play with some of the older folks around here, and everybody works together, which I think is really, really awesome about our scene. You get some veterans, I don't want to say old guard, but some of the veteran musicians, and there's some wonderful young musicians, and they're looking to you. And I know sometimes the veterans are looking down at, hey, what are you guys doing these days? And how are you making it different? And
well, it's also, I consider it like an art of passage, so to speak. We're all getting, none of us are that young anymore, and we have to pass the torch of our, whatever legacy we have, to them.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, they have YouTube, but we had the advantage of a lot more places that we could play in a lot more often than a lot of these very talented young people.
Right.
And, I don't begrudge any of them for how great, many of them play.
Right.
They also had to at least still, work sort of hard to build their skill set.
Oh, sure.
Obviously.
Yeah.
And I really like that when, and I think you probably experience this from time to time, Carol, where a lot of times a young guitar player who I really respect will come up to me and say, hey, what was that you just did?
Yeah.
How did you do that? What were you thinking? Happened just the other night. My nephew Steve came over and he plays in that band XOXO.
Okay. Yeah.
And he was having some difficulty. He said, I still don't know how to play over changes. Can you show me?
Right.
And I said, well, I can't show you in 15 minutes, but I can at least get you started.
Right.
And I got a big kick out of that because you got to give back.
Right.
And I love that. I love being able to give back. I wish I could give back more, but time is a little bit precious, still for me. I mean, not that I'm like the busiest guy in the world, but there's enough going on as you get older with medical appointments and dental appointments and crap like that you got to deal with,
Right. Well, kind of on that point, one of my favorite stories is I love the Shriver family, and Joni Marshall and Linda Lou were on the show, and they were telling us I was actually they do that live taping every Christmas time with the Ramblin' Lou family band, and now the grandkids are now getting involved, and they're just fantastic musicians. And after a show a couple of years ago, one of the person came up, was talking to Joni, and says, it's so cool to see your grandson looking over at you and watching you play the guitar. And she says, watching me play the guitar, he's trying to steal my riffs. He says, no. He says, I worked hard to figure it, because she can play Johnny B. Good better than anybody.
She can play a lot. I mean,
oh my gosh, she's
can play
fantastic.
That old, especially years ago, she could really play that old style country stuff really good. And I mean the flashier stuff, not just the basic, country stuff. Got real quick story. I recorded Linda Lou.
Oh, did you?
And I with that band back in and I loved doing that. So the funny part was, so Joni was obviously playing guitar, right? But they needed a second guitar to do some stuff, So they were in like the second verse. She asked, I just, for whatever reason, I had my black Strat that I use for 90% of my gigs to this day. So I was doing these volume swell violin type things in the verse. And I thought, I'm going to get in trouble for doing this kind of stuff in the country tune. So that verse ends, and I said, and she didn't say anything. And then I asked Joni, I said, well, what do you want me to do in the third verse? She goes, you got to do some more of that woo-woo stuff. and I got a big kick out of it.
Yeah. Oh, they're wonderful people. I'm going to kind of open this up now. So hopefully some folks out there have some questions to ask of Dick. As I mentioned, the mic over there is open for anyone. Don't be shy. But if you do have a question for Dick, please ask it, and we'll see what if he can answer it for you. So I guess everything's on the table, right, Dick?
There's no filter.
That's
as
right.
long as we're not talking, as long as we're not talking politics,
yep,
or about the French Revolution, I'm open for anything.
There you go. Yeah. So
although I could talk about that, but I'd rather not.
Yeah. Man, Carol, you gotta have a question or a comment or something. So, well, I'm gonna put you. Okay. No, go rock on. So
she never met a microphone she didn't like.
No, I know. So
it's Carol Jean. I really didn't want to take over anything, but I do have a comment. I have to comment about Art Kubera, because I don't know if anybody here really knows what we're talking about. Fillmore Avenue, way back in the 1960s, he was the only music store, the person selling musical instruments and amplifiers and everything. And then there was Ruda's Records. That was where you went for records. There were record stores. But Art Kubera, I just have to say that I started kind of like you did. Well, I took piano lessons when I was 5 years old, but I started like you did, playing guitar in the mid-1960s. Like, we got to play guitar. We got to be in a band and play guitar. And one day I came home from high school, and I walk into my living room, and sitting there is a Wurlitzer electric piano. And the only one that could have possibly done anything to get it there would have been my mom. It turns out my mom, Evelyn Fremy, went to Arts, said, well, my daughter's playing guitar, but she's really a piano player because she's been playing since she was a child, and she's really better at that. So she's got to learn how to play piano in a band, not guitar. So somehow, I don't know how or who helped, and a Wurlitzer electric piano is really heavy. It really weighs a lot. It was sitting there in my living room, and I said, Mom, what's this? She said, get going. I go, well, what do you mean get going? She said, start learning. And what you said, put on the records and start learning like parts off a record. She goes, get going. But I just think when you mention Art Kubera, I don't know what his financial deal with her was. She probably paid all at once. I'm not even sure.
Probably did.
But just the idea that he would help her, or he would listen to her about her daughter, and then find something to recommend, and then she brings it home to my living room. So he was a sweetheart. Yeah, he was. Yeah. And I'm so glad that you
Patron saint.
brought up. Yeah,
The
yeah.
patron saint of all Buffalo musicians.
Kind of like the only person back then who had music store or sold any kind of musical instruments.
And there was Kenmore Music too, but they weren't dealing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were like, it costs this much. Either you have the money or you don't. So there was no real flexibility with Kenmore Music. And again, not that I blame them for that. It's just that we were so blessed to have Art Kubera, who was able to and willing to help us all out.
There would be thousands of stories about Art, but I just thought I would tell mine because it involved my mother. And between the two of them, Art and my mother, that's probably why I know how to play some of the stuff I know how to play today, all learned by ear off of records like Ray Charles, Ramsey Lewis, get going, start learning.
Well, thank you, Carol Jean Swist, and from Big Willie and the Hubcaps fame, and you can see Carol Jean all over the place playing at the Rain Tree, and with different bands, and and with I know Ladies First. I've been fortunate to play with those guys too. And, we have played together. Yeah, we've played
still
together.
Doing it.
Yeah,
still doing it.
Yeah, it's and great stuff. Yeah, it's and of course, if you're interested, Carol's been on the show before, so look up her episode. So, and there's I was able to do a great pictorial. You were able to lend me some of your old photos and stuff. So there's a great digital flip book on my website at rockabillygreg.com. Whole album of stuff that kind of gives you a good pictorial of Big Wheelie, and as they mentioned, a lot of names thrown around. Caesar and the Romans was the band, and you mentioned Chuck Vaccaro, who was Big Wheelie. After they did that, and the story I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Big Wheelie kind of came out from a intermission kind of a thing, right? They'd kind of do some stuff, and then they'd kind of put on this persona, and that just kind of turned into its own thing.
That's what I understand.
Yeah. From the friendship train. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I have to say, I for the longest time, before we even had a chance to meet face to face, I always had admired Carol from afar.
Right.
Because when we used to have a night off, like back in '71, the friendship train would play regularly at this place, roughly on the site of Classics, called The Scene. And I used to come up there and see them play all the time. And I enjoyed the friendship train. Mm-hmm. And then they would do the Big Wheelie set usually right after that.
Sure.
And I could just tell that Carol really had it together. It looked like everybody in the band was like looking at her for like directions. And that's sort of what happens to me now. The whole band is like looking at me, and especially if they screw up, they get the evil eye, or at least they accuse me of giving them the evil eye, which is only partially true.
Somebody's got to be the quarterback up there, right?
Well, Ken Kaufman from the road.
Yeah.
Ken Kaufman, a very profound musical philosopher, as well as being a very talented guy. His credo is always, in a band, there's no room for democracy. Somebody has to be the boss. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I took that lesson with me, because it's true. Otherwise you have chaos. Mm-hmm. You have chaos, but the boss has to be a good leader. He has to be respectful, and you treat people differently depending upon their personality. But you know what? If you get in with the right group of people, which I'm blessed to have in ASP, if you get in with the right group of people, being the boss is so easy because you don't have to babysit anybody. Mm-hmm. They all want to be good. And you don't have to like chide anybody. Hey, you didn't learn this, or you got to work on that. No, we don't have any of that. People come prepared, and that's what makes the band an utter joy to be a part of.
Right. I was just going to pick up on that. It's all rehearse, and I know I've heard many stories, especially our friend Nick Veltri has always told me. He says, the pedigree, with you guys, all teaching each other and working with each other. He says, you can go anywhere in this country and go to a recording studio and tell them you're from Buffalo, and they'll hire you on the spot, because the teaching and the mentoring and everything that came out of Buffalo, and how you all like work together. And now, and as I mentioned, it's starting to go downhill with the younger generations. And as I mentioned, with the Sportsman's Foundation, we've got folks that are teaching these young kids, and with the band camp scholarships, and they're all just doing great stuff, and everyone wants. I haven't met anyone yet who doesn't want to see someone succeed.
Problem is, like we talked about earlier in the cast, they don't have the opportunity. They can be the most talented people in the universe, but they don't have enough opportunities to play. And it's one thing. I'm really the poster child for being guilty of this. It's one thing to play at home, to practice at home, but nothing takes the place of doing it on stage in front of people. Those are called stage chops. And the only way you get stage chops is to actually do it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I was lucky. I played a lot of gigs that helped me get through those rougher periods when I didn't know what the heck I was doing.
Right.
These young kids don't have that opportunity.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of them would choke if they did because they don't have the opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, I was very fortunate. Good friend Bobby LaBelle asked my buddy Steve and I have a folk duo with my buddy Steve, and he says, "Hey, we're playing at the Sportsman's. Why don't you open up for us?" And we sucked. We were terrible. Our harmonies. I asked Bobby. I said, "Can you record this?" And because we need some like audition stuff. And we went down into his. We were late. We were nervous because we're playing Sportsman's Tavern. I mean, that's like, to me, that's a pinnacle of.
It is.
It's like the Opry in Buffalo. I mean, you get on that stage and it's revered, and
you got to be good.
Yeah, and you have to be. And we were not that night. And and we went to Bobby's studio. He's like, "Yeah, we're going to overdub some stuff." And he's just like, "Guys, I got to tell you, why don't we just start over?" There was no making it any better. So, and God bless him. But we did play there again, and I think we covered ourselves the next times we were up there, and that was good. Even one guy says, "Boy, you guys got a lot better,"
which you hope was a compliment.
We hope. I said I'll take that as a compliment. Right. I won't take that as something bad. But of course,
to all of us. So I mean, we've all had our moments where we just wanted to crawl off the stage.
Right.
It happens.
Yeah. Well, and again, playing with Bobby and his musicians at Buffalo Mob. I know, Carol, you've played with them, and Steve and I got to open up for them for about 4 years, and it's like I'm on stage with Billy Sheehan, for crying out loud. I mean, guy tours all over the world, and here I am, this little guy doing a podcast out of his basement, and we're singing with him. So it's
cool.
It's really cool stuff. So yeah. Who are the current members of ASP?
Current members, in addition to myself.
Yep.
Al Monte plays sax. He's in the Buffalo Music Hall of Fame. Matt Young plays keyboards. He's in the Buffalo Music Hall of Fame. He also does stuff with Carl Dixon, and he's also part of the Buffalo Bound thing that Bobby does on Monday nights. Steve Trucy, who plays with just about everybody in the universe, plays bass.
Mm-hmm.
Donnie Tomasulo plays drums. And Mike Bruno, who's also in the Buffalo Music Hall of Fame, is the other guitar player.
Okay.
And Amy Frost, who most recently was voted the Female Vocalist of the Year, is our lead singer.
Right.
And she is terrific.
Yeah.
She is absolutely terrific. I have, sometimes, female singers in bands get a bad rap. I mean, especially with the guys in the band. But I've been lucky. I've played with some really great ones.
Right.
And Amy is one of the guys. And she's not a diva. She's easy to get along with. And you know what? Real quick, we did not mention, speaking of quasi divas, the Celine Dion thing that I did for 2 years in a row.
Ah.
And, I did at the Riviera. I was a music director for 2 years in a row for Elisa Furr. She won a network show, the Battle of the Cover Bands, and she's a pretty much a big shot in that universe. And she's based out of Las Vegas, does a lot of gigs at the big places there. And so she was doing a gig at the Riviera, and I was referred to be her music director. Mm-hmm. And that was really a challenge. I mean, playing Celine Dion songs. And this show was totally orchestrated, by the way. We had to play with some backing tracks like violins and backup vocals. No margin for error. Plus, it was synced to video. Mm-hmm. So it was like everything either had to be perfect or else. And I thought, this will be fun. This will be a challenge. And we pulled it off. Mike Caputi did the first show. John Bryans did the second show. And they both did a magnificent job. And Elisa's a hoot. She's a character. Not exactly a diva because she was very, very nice. Mm-hmm. But a little, she could be a little, let me just say eccentric. And real quick story on that. So when she hires me, I get all the charts and I accumulate all the click tracks and stuff. And 3 weeks before the show, we're having a conversation, and she says to me, "I'm sorry I've been out of touch, but I'll send you a picture. I've been dating this guy. I'm going to dump him, but he's been driving me crazy for a month. I'll send you a picture." She sends me the picture, and I'm like, that can't be who I think it is. It was Steve Lukather from Toto. Now here, I'm the guitar player that has to play for her when she's hanging around with one of the great guitar players of all time. And then she tells me, well, I dated Jonathan Cain from Journey for 5 years too. And this is 3 weeks before I have to do a show with her. Right. And I'm like, well, if I got an A+++ game, I better find it in the next 3 weeks. So, but everything worked out. It was good.
Well, Dick, we're actually at the top of the hour. I can't thank you enough for sharing all your stories at Kenilworth Library. Thanks for having us. Carol, thanks for throwing in some stories there, and greatly appreciate it. Always good to see you. And thanks for everyone who's tuned in. You can always find the podcast where you get your podcasts at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audible, thebuffalohive.com, YouTube, and of course you can always find them at rockabillygreg.com, where it's all about the music. And I will also have links to where you can find where Dick's playing. We'll have some links to the library and some other added extra goodies, like I mentioned with Carol, some photos and different things. I was able to get out to your show last week, so I got some great photos of the band. So we're going to throw those up there on the site. And so it's good stuff. So again, for everyone who's tuned in, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. In the Flamingo Lounge is made possible in part by CatsLikeUs.com, your online store for authentic vintage clothing and accessories. Buffalo Ironworks, an intimate live music venue and bar located in the Cobblestone District in downtown Buffalo. And by Diamond Hawk Golf Course and Pub, Western New York's premier golf course, restaurant, and banquet facility. At the Hawk, the bar is hopping year-round with live music every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, and some other nights, too. Tune in for a new episode every Saturday at 9 a.m. EST at rockabillygreg.com, where it's all about the music. Bark, Zoe, bark. Good girl.